A shock in the dark.
I met my best friend Neil in 4th grade. We were both into Dungeons and Dragons, Elvis Costello, and we read a lot of the same books. We bonded immediately. In our teenage years, we would have fireworks fights in the woods near his house, shooting Roman candles and bottle rockets at each other. Yeah, I know that was stupid for a bunch of different reasons, but we had a lot of fun and luckily survived. One night we went out in his big brother's El Camino. We bought 3 dozen eggs and were determined to go egg bomb as many houses and cars as possible. That got cut short when Neil threw the first egg at a passing car. It seems Neil, in all the excitement, had forgotten to roll down his window first. The egg just splatted on the inside of the window, covering him, me, the entire interior of his big brother's car. We laughed until we cried. We eventually found a car wash that was still open and threw away the eggs and spent the night cleaning out his brother's car to prevent Neil from getting his butt kicked the next day. Neil and I eventually ended up being roomies together in college. By the time we got to college, we had turned all our mischievous energy into urban exploring. This is before most people had heard of it, well before people were posting their adventures on YouTube. We weren't ghost hunting or looking to steal or damage anything. We were just naturally curious and had a taste for adventure. We ended up exploring abandoned hospitals, shopping malls, hotels, even our old high school, which was a private school that had to shut its doors a couple of years after we graduated due to funding issues. But there was one building we had always wanted to explore but seemed impossible to get into. It was the old bank building right in the middle of town. It was a giant white building with all these inventors and explorers carved into its ornamental facade, as well as some gargoyles near the top and a giant clock at the highest tower. The building was huge, probably 10 or 11 stories high, and its footprint was almost an entire city block. We didn't really do the research on it, but because of the architecture, I figured it was built sometime in the 1920s. We did attempt to find out who owned it, and as far as we were able to find out, the building was owned by some guy in the UK who never wanted to sell or even rent it out to anybody, in spite of a big real estate sign at the front of the building. So this place had been vacant going all the way back to the 60s. We wanted to explore it so bad, but it was basically a fortress. There were so many bars and a mall and theaters and restaurants surrounding the building. There were always people around. Plus, it seemed like there were only 2 entrances, a big glass door in the front and an old metal fire exit in the alley in the back. It might as well be Area 51 or something. There was just no way we had the skills to break into a place like that. Neil and I eventually graduated. He became a pharmacist and moved to Nashville, Tennessee. I became the regional manager of a chain of stores in the Midwest. One day, a few years after we graduated, Neil calls me up and says,
"When can you make it back to our hometown?"
"Why? What's going on?"
"Dude, I can get us into the bank building."
"You're kidding."
"No, you know how it has that censored realty sign on the front of it? Well, it just so happens that I'm friends with John Censored, who took over the business from his dad, so we don't even have to break in. I can get a key."
We arranged to meet up in our old hometown in the next month. We met up, we had dinner, caught up on what was happening with each other, gossiped about which of our old classmates were now in prison, which beauty queens were now ragged old spinsters, and which ugly ducklings were now beauty queens, and what nerdy kids who always got picked on were now internet millionaires. One of the quietest guys in our class, with the least personality, was now doing the nightly weather report in New York City. We pulled up videos of him on YouTube. He's a completely different person now. Unbelievable. The next night was the big night. Even though we had a code to get a key from the lockbox, both of us still dressed up the way we usually would, all black and a vest full of supplies. Flashlights, extra batteries, camera, a few tools, lock-picking kit, the usual stuff. We met up at 1 a.m., snagged the key from the box, went inside, and locked the doors behind us. We could tell we weren't the first to explore this place. There were footprints in the dust, a few old blankets and pillows. Our best guess was that maybe one or two group of explorers like us had been in here within the past 10 years. Maybe a few homeless people had come through recently. The first floor was the old bank, a giant vault and everything. The safety deposit boxes had all been drilled out and were laying all over the place. There was a money cage, empty of course, just like all the teller drawers. We went through all the offices and back areas of the bank before deciding to go up a level. We stuck some old papers in the door to the stairway, just in case, and made our way up to the second floor. These were all business offices. Everything was made out of really nice wood like oak and cherry, and the glass on the doors was painted with different business names, old school style. There was a U.S. assay office, whatever that is, a couple of lawyer offices. Those still had the old-time dial-up phones on the desks. A surveyor, a talent agency, but not really much to see, except the elevator. The elevator was insanely ornate. It was gold-colored metal, had Art Deco designing, just beautiful. We continued up to floor 3, more offices. Floor 4, which was some kind of cafeteria restaurant. I mean, it was a restaurant, but not a fancy one. It was the kind where you put the food on your tray and go pay for each item before sitting down. I forget what you call that, but it was similar to a school lunchroom. The 6th floor is where things started getting interesting. The air had a smell to it, like burning plastic and poop. Just a horrible smell. But the 6th floor also had an old radio station. All of the equipment was gone, but the rooms were still built out with double-paned windows that leaned about 20 degrees. I'm sure that was something to do with making it soundproof. There was also a door that opened up to a small, maybe 20 by 20 foot patio area that still had the old radio antenna. We still had 5 more floors to go, but this was almost like a 6th floor courtyard type thing. We went back inside and that burning poo smell just hit us again. It was strong. We didn't see any smoke anywhere, so we assumed we were okay. We were walking up the stairs again, and just before we opened the stair door to floor 7, Neil said, "You know, that's how you can tell a demon is nearby, that burning smell." I pushed Neil. He lost his balance and tripped a bit, causing him to hit the bar on the door with full force, opening the door and making this enormous sound that just echoed through the whole building. Neil fell into the giant open area on floor 7, an enormous room that looked to be about 3 football fields in size. There was a fire in the middle of the room, contained within an old 55-gallon drum, and lots of nasty, acrid smoke. And people. Standing right in front of us was an old shirtless hippie, thin, stringy gray hair almost down to his thighs, and holding a machete. I don't have any idea why I did not go into panic mode at that time. I just didn't. Hippie man says,
"You boys lost or something?"
"Actually, we just came in to check out this old building. It's an awesome building. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. We'll get out of your hair." Yes, I actually said get out of your hair to the hippie. It was an accident. Old hippie man says,
"Nonsense, you're welcome here. You know, you're here for a reason. An important reason."
My eyes were adjusting and I noticed there was an old hippie woman in a long gown standing in the shadows. She also appeared to be holding a machete.
"You're here to learn, to experience. I have an important message for you."
"Oh, that's very kind of you, sir, to give us a special message." I was trying to keep everything super positive and super polite. Neil was just halfway laying on the floor, not saying a damn thing.
Ha! You boys probably just thought you were gonna walk through a cool building tonight, right? But look, you have a message. Isn't the universe amazing?
It certainly is. It's so amazing.
Come sit over here near the fire.
I'm all right. I'm plenty warm after walking up those stairs.
I insist you both sit.
I looked at Neil. We non-verbally communicated with each other. I am okay with sitting, but if dude starts attacking you or hacking you to death, I'm getting out of here. So we sat down next to each other, legs crossed in lotus position.
Do you know what this fire is?
Is it an offering?
Very good. No. This is a process of rapid oxidation. It's combustion. It gives light and heat. And our fire here is a signal to the angels.
Oh, wow.
The angels are coming. They'll be here in a few minutes, and you have arrived just in time through the miracle of the blood of the Lamb to learn what has become of humanity.
At this point, both Neil and I were starting to understand that we could possibly be in some real, true danger. The old hippie man sat down in front of us, his legs crossed, back to the fire. His face got very serious, and he leaned in to be eye to eye with us. He spoke to us, one at a time, staring deeply into each of our eyes.
You see, the message I have for the angels is bad news. Bad news of great sorrow. The news is both of you are dead. I am dead. My wife Felicia is dead. We are all dead. Satan himself has told me this. He has revealed this to me, and there is nothing that can be done. Now God needs to know so that the great tribunal may begin, and we can all be judged by the works of our hand.
How do you know the devil isn't lying?
That's what he wants you to think. So he tells the truth, because who's going to believe the devil, right? But I know. And you can know if you just open your eyes and look around you at all the tiny people walking around thinking that they're doing something important. They are not. They are dead, and they don't even know it.
Well, thanks for letting us know. That's very kind of you, but we really gotta get home or our parents will be mad. I said this even though both of us were near enough 30 years old.
Oh, but you must stay. When the angels arrive, they can take us all straight to heaven. We will not need to suffer anymore. Wouldn't you like your suffering to end right now?
A shiver went down my spine. Well, I need to let my family know about this.
There isn't time.
Well, I've got to let my family know about all this. Neil and I got up and started heading for the door, all the while talking as we made our way out of there. Yeah, no, our parents are really close. They're right downstairs, so we're going to go get them, and then we can all get out of here together. What an awesome day. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting us know. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes.
Hurry, I cannot keep them here for long.
Neil and I busted through the stair door and ran as fast as we could down 14 flights of stairs, skipping stairs, going 3 at a time, jumping the landings as fast as humanly possible. We finally got to the front door, unlocked it, ran outside, and locked it again. We put the key in the lockbox and tore out of there. The whole time we just felt like this guy's gonna track us down. I don't know why I remained so calm during the entire event, but my best guess is it comes from having kids. And one of the first things you learn when you have a new baby in the house is babies pick up on things. Your energy, your voice, your mannerisms. Maybe there's some sort of psychic connection. Who knows? But If you are tense and afraid, your baby is tense and afraid. I guess I just thought the same thing would work with the old hippie, and maybe it did. For whatever it's worth, that night when I got into bed, I dreamed about that old man. I dreamed about that old man and his wife and the fire in the building and the angels who came to visit. And I gotta say, if my dream had anything to do with reality, those were definitely not angels. Hi, aSHOCKintheDARK. I found your show through Miss Fearsome here on YouTube, and then I found Mortis Media and Hellfreezer through you. So thanks for being part of my nightly entertainment. Here are my obligatory stats. I'm 26, male, and I live in the southwestern United States. Now here's my story. My family is somewhere between a staunch skeptic and hardcore paranormal believer. In other words, we love a good spooky story, but we don't actually believe any of it's real. There are two creepy stories in my family that have been passed down through the generations. The first one is about my great-great-grandmother, who, according to legend, sat up in her coffin at her own funeral. And oddly enough, there is some evidence that this happened, but it appears that it was because her backwoods doctor didn't actually have a medical degree and pronounced her dead about 22 years prematurely. The other story, if true, isn't as easily explained. Family lore has it that one day when my great-great-grandfather was very old, very ill, and close to the end of his life, a large black dog showed up at my great-great-grandparents' farm. It sat down near the old oak tree in front of the house and didn't move from that spot for 3 whole days. However, on the third day, at the exact same time, my great-great-grandfather was taking his last breath. The big black dog started howling and crying, the saddest whimpering you've ever heard. And of course, the family was more concerned with my great-great-grandfather and were attentive to him. But when they looked outside, the big black dog was nowhere to be seen. In my family, if you say big black dog, everybody knows you're talking about this story. Fast forward to the 1940s. The son of the man who dies in the big black dog story was an aerial gunner in the Army Air Corps. My great-grandmother was sitting on the porch with my grandfather, who was just a toddler at the time, when she sees a big black dog trotting up the old dirt road that passes by the farm. The story goes that great-grandma got real tense and started quietly praying. But when that dog entered the farm and it made its way over to the old oak tree, she just lost it and started crying. Sure enough, it was 3 days later, about 2 o'clock in the morning, when the big black dog just starts howling and whimpering like it's the saddest dog in the world. It woke up great-grandma and my grandfather and everybody in the house. And the next day, the dog was gone. It was a couple of days later that a military vehicle drove up to the farm and let great-grandma know that great-grandpa was missing. They never actually recovered my great-grandfather, but my great-grandma said she knew the moment the dog came onto the farm that she'd never see my great-grandfather again. I've always thought of this as a good, spooky family story, but now in present day, my mom and dad live in that same house on that same farm. Well, a couple of nights ago, my sister brought her new boyfriend home from college. just to meet the family and so he could see where she grew up and all that stuff. Well, my mom made a giant meal, and we were all sitting around the big table, and had just started passing around dishes of food when my sister's boyfriend asked,
"So, what other animals do you have here besides the dog and the cat?"
Everybody froze. I swear it was like my throat shrank and I couldn't swallow the turkey I'd been chewing on. My sister's face turned bright red. My mom, after a brief pause, just casually says, "Oh, well, we don't have a dog. In fact, the only animal on this farm anymore is Moon Kitty." Moon Kitty is the weird name my sister came up with for her cat that still lives with my mom and dad. My sister nervously asks, "Why did you think we had a dog?" Boyfriend answers,
"Oh, I would have sworn I saw a big black dog, like a German Shepherd or something, when we first pulled into the driveway, but maybe it's a stray or something."
My dad got up, grabbed his jacket and flashlight, and took a walk outside. I followed him. We went out to the oak tree and nothing was there. I felt such a huge wave of relief that there wasn't a dog sitting out there that I actually laughed a little. It's interesting how something can be a fun story, but when the rubber meets the road, you find out maybe you believe in it a little more than you'd like to admit. Me and Dad walked back from the oak tree to the house. I think both of us were really relieved not to find anything. My dad put his hand on the doorknob, and just before he pushed the door open, I heard him say, quietly, almost to himself, "Just a silly old story." And I think he almost has himself convinced of that. I'm a female. I was 19 at the time the story takes place. I was homeless, and it was winter. It was sometime around late February, and I was in Abilene, Texas. In my mind, sleeping at night was just not an option. I was terrified at the possibility that I might actually fall asleep at night. That could very well end in injury, robbery, murder, or some kind of psychological horror show that I was just not prepared for. So I just walked. I would spend every night just walking around the streets of Abilene. I was one of the lucky ones. I actually had a few dollars to my name, and the rest of my belongings, everything I owned, was in a totem bag I wore over my shoulder. So one evening, I think it was a Saturday, I had just finished eating a luxurious meal from Taco Bell. Believe me, when you're hungry, I'm telling you right now, Taco Bell can taste as good as any home-cooked meal you've ever had. But anyway, I just finished eating, and I was disappointed to find out it was only 10 o'clock at night. I was hoping it was later, because that would mean less time walking around in fear and in the cold. I still had $2, even after purchasing that huge, authentic Mexican dinner, so I walked a few blocks over to McDonald's and ordered a $1 menu item. I wasn't hungry in that moment, but it was dark, and it was getting later and colder. You'd be surprised how cold the streets of Abilene can be on a February night. That $1 for the $1 menu item was the price of admission. You're not actually buying a snack. Your McDonald's receipt entitles you to sit down on something that people are meant to sit down on. It entitles you to be indoors, be somewhat warm, be in a well-lit place, around normal,
somewhat normal human beings. All this plus you get a snack. It was perfect. I was trying to spend as much time indoors as possible. I knew I had a lot of walking to do that night, and I had already been walking around all day. McDonald's was empty. I knew it was closing time because the employees were starting to clean up, and a couple of them would look over at me every once in a while and telepathically communicate the message, are you ever gonna leave, lady? I had no other options left, so I hit the streets. For those who don't know, Abilene is a small town in Texas. At night, it is dark. Some parts of the city are real forest. Some parts are full of rednecks. Then there's the employed minority section, the unemployed minority section, the unemployed white person section. There's a section for drug dealers, one for drug addicts. There's a portion of the city that's devoted to hookers, and even a section of the city where decent folk live. All of these imaginary borders dividing up this tiny plot of land randomly plopped down in the middle of Texas. It didn't matter what section of the city you're in. It can be dangerous when it's at night and when there's no people around. You don't escape trouble by heading into a certain section of the city. The section of the city that you're in just determines what kind of trouble you're going to get into. I decided that instead of just wandering around aimlessly, I should try to track down this guy I met a few weeks ago. I would have to venture into some bad areas, but it would all be worth it if I could talk him into letting me just spend the night at his place. This guy had an actual house. It was run down, no electricity or running water or anything, but that was the Ritz-Carlton compared to sleeping in the park or a business doorway. It was a longer walk than I remembered, and my body was getting fatigued from walking around nearly 24 hours. After crossing several streets devoid of any traffic, I walked through the long, winding roads of the neighborhood. Each house was closed and dark, the inhabitants asleep for the night. I envied them. It caused me physical and emotional pain if I allowed myself to imagine them snuggled up, tucked away with love in their warm beds, safe and comfortable, clouds for pillows. But I finally arrived at my friend's house. At least, I thought it was his house. I knocked on the door and waited. And waited. About 5 or 10 minutes dragged by real slow, and just before I was going to knock again or maybe walk off, I heard movement from behind the door. The door swung open, and I was relieved to see it was my friend. That lasted all of 2 seconds as he immediately informed me that I couldn't stay there. As it turned out, he was a caregiver to an elderly woman. That was her house, and he couldn't allow anybody to stay there. I was bummed, to say the least. He started to shut the door, but then he opened it back up real quick and said, "Hang on. Go wait across the street. Just give me 5 minutes." And he shut the door. Well, what else was I gonna do? No particular place to go. I stood across the street. I did not like standing across the street. I was afraid of the night, and I was just standing there by myself in a dark street. I looked up and down the street at all the houses lined up in little rows. Nobody going in, nobody coming out. There was exactly one street light on the whole street, and I just stood there underneath it. On one of the cross streets, there were all these neatly landscaped houses. Behind me, nothing but vacant lots and forest. To my left, about half a block away, an empty drainage ditch. A creek ran through there at one time, but it had dried up ages ago. How long ago? I don't know. And that started me down a dangerous path of asking myself how long I had been homeless, how long I had been in Abilene, how old I was, how long will I be homeless? Will anything ever be different? It scared me that I didn't have the foggiest idea what the correct answer was to any of those questions. I was terrified because I was all alone, and it was night, and bad things happened to young girls in these streets at night. Very bad things. I could walk all over the city and feel just fine. But standing alone under the streetlight at night, I was certain that I was going to be abducted by someone or something. Just then, a car came around the corner, and it was headed my way. It came down the road, past the nice houses with the nice lawns, and pulled up right in front of me and stopped. The passenger door opened. It was my friend. He had a car. Now that is fancy, I said. He told me to hop in, and I did. I asked him what we were doing. He told me he was driving me back across town to his house, and I could stay the night until I figured something out. Wow. Something in me just broke at that moment. A dam, a levee that had held back so many emotions for probably years. It just crumbled. And so did I. I collapsed upon myself in the passenger seat and just cried the whole way back to his place. I couldn't be certain of what the future would hold. But I could be certain of where I would be that night. And sometimes that's enough.